Hey, worship teams, welcome, welcome. Brandon Dempsey, worship team training. Great to have you. How are you today? Thanks so much for joining us here on the worship team hangout. We got our friends, as you can see, our friends here on Periscope. It's not, I probably need to put some books up, right? Kind of like make this a little pedestal so that way our friends don't get, they feel like they kind of got a front row seat and not like the nosebleed section, right? So we'll try to angle it in a way that they can see it. But I'm glad that you guys are here. This is what it's all about. Brandon Dempsey, worship team training, hangout, and we got a special guest. We have Leslie Burroughs with us today, so we are so excited to have you guys with us as we talk about authentic worship. And it's such a blast to have our friends on board. So let's go ahead and get right to it and welcome our famous, well-known November stash, kind of November, almost want to be a beard, but not quite there. Don't know what that is. But Tony Guerrera without the glasses, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm great, man. Great to see you. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
About to begin. And our man Rich, what's up, brother? How you doing today? How is the stash this morning? Did it sleep in or did it wake up okay?
It never sleeps.
It never sleeps. Interesting.
That's creepy.
It is.
It kind of is. I think I think like the thing and Cousin It together, is one. It's like this mustache that kind of crawls on its own out of the box.
It's kind of like Jimmy Fallon, the skit where the barking Donald Trump hair.
Yeah.
It kind of does its own. It's a much deeper bark, though. You need subwoofers to hear it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So today we have our special guest, Leslie Burroughs. If you were with us last time, we had Ryan Kennedy, and man, that was a fantastic show. We talked about how to engage worship across the generations, and it was fantastic to have his perspective and to talk about how we can reach both young and old. But really, it's not about age. It's really all about worship and being in Christ and what He's called us to do as worship leaders. So we're going to take that another step further today and talking about the authenticity of leading worship. Now, before we begin, you have to keep in mind the next shows that we have coming up. We have a great friend, Cynthia Cullen, that actually Rich knows, and she's coming on the broadcast on the 9th of December. After that, we have Laura Marriott. So Laura's going to be with us to talk about vocal stuff. So I'm very excited. Laura is good friends with Stephanie Kelly. So Laura's going to be joining us soon. And also, don't forget, next Tuesday on the 1st, December, we have Rich Kirkpatrick. We're going to be talking our webinar. By the way, it's free. We did one last night with Tim Timmons, and we rocked it. Well, sorry, not we. Timmons rocked it. Timmons just was a rocket. Shot it out, just lift off, completely blew up in the sky, was amazing. And we talked about leading worship. Rich is going to come to us next Tuesday to talk about how we can better lead worship and rearranging our stale Christmas music and making it fresh the way it's intended to be. Christmas music is an awesome, awesome expression, gift, and tool, but how do you use it in a Sunday-to-Sunday context and not just doing the same old, same old? Rich has some great ideas, some great insights, so be sure to check us out, worshipteamtraining.com/events, and sign up. The link will go up today, and you can follow us on Twitter for all the feeds, and plus join us 8 p.m. next Tuesday night, Central Time, with Rich Kirkpatrick. So, without further ado, I'd love to get to our awesome, awesome guest today, Leslie Burroughs. I've had the pleasure of leading worship with her for the past 3 months in our Saturday night service, and just an amazing gifted singer. She sounds, she's got a very recognizable voice of a Carrie Joe, but she's got her own sweetness to it that it's very unique, and just a very sweet spirit on stage. Loves people, loves to sing, and I really enjoy her heart. She is right now working on a brand new album with our very own Sarah Kelly and Jonas Inkman, and so that's going to be coming out later next year in 2016. She's from Palmdale, California. Leslie, her hope, what she says is that her hope is that every song will draw people closer to Jesus and love, the love that He freely offers. So you can find Leslie at leslieburroughs.com. Find her music. So without any further ado, please welcome to the program Leslie Burroughs. How are you, Leslie?
Hello, I'm great. So great to be here.
Awesome. It's great to have you. You're coming from Chicago today, right? With all
Yes,
the
I
riots.
am.
You're in the riots, weren't you?
No,
You didn't get beat
it's
up,
too
so
cold. It's too cold to be outside.
that's good. Well, I mean, you look unscathed, so that's a good thing. So how cold is it right now in Chicago?
It's like 40 degrees.
40 degrees. So for
Yeah.
Californians, that's like, Siberia.
Yeah.
Right, Rich? All right, awesome. So let's go and do this. We got, of course, our questions that we always have for the show, and we're talking about authentic worship. So I'm going to start with, let's see, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So, Mr. Mo, tell us, what does it mean to be authentic in worship? Can you tell us, please?
I don't know who Mo is.
Who's Mo?
That would be you. I'm looking at you. We're all looking at you. We're all waiting. We're anticipating. On the edge of our seats. Come forth. Wisdom. Release the knowledge.
Brandon, we have no idea who you're talking about.
Look, dude, if there's any brain cell here, it would be you. Okay? So just go for it.
You want me to answer the question?
I asked you, what do we mean by authentic worship? Come on. Quit playing around, Tony.
I heard a great response to this question from, I've mentioned Alva before, who is who I lead worship with on Sundays, and she is by far the best leader I've ever worked with in worship anywhere. Not just worship leader, but leader of people. And she's a no-nonsense kind of person. Don't ask her her opinion if you don't want to hear the truth kind of person. And she was sitting on a panel with there were a bunch of young worship leaders, and it was all this kind of modern stuff going on. And she's a hardcore, she's more in the gospel world. But they were going around, and the guy who was facilitating this panel discussion was basically asking the question, how do you prepare for worship? And the conversation was going down the line of, like, do you stand in front of the mirror and make, so you practice your facial expressions and make sure, and that's what they were thinking of with preparing for worship, was like, how do you look? How are you presenting? How are you getting ready for the stage? That kind of thing. And if you know Alva, by the time it came to her, she was kind of bubbling over because it was just driving her crazy. Her answer has stuck with me for the 2 weeks. Like, I've thought about it every single day since I heard this 2 weeks ago. And she said, they finally asked her, so how do you prepare for worship? And she said, when I was a kid, we had a really tough life, and things at home were not good. And she said, but one day I could always look forward to was Christmas, because we always had Christmas. It was always the day I looked forward to the most during the year, and I knew there'd be presents and food and family. And she said, I would wake up in the morning. Nobody had to wake me up early. I would wake up because I was so excited, and I would just run out of bed, and I would run to the tree, and I would run to those presents, and nothing could have stopped me. I was so excited. She says, when I wake up on Sunday morning, that's how I approach Jesus' presence. And she said, I do not have to prepare for worship. I cannot wait to be with Jesus. And that whole thing stuck with me, because I've heard that discussion of preparing for worship. How do you prepare? Well, you got to pray, you got to do all this. And really, if you start reading, I mean, the Bible has us says be in a constant state of prayer, basically. And that answer just stuck with me, that she doesn't have to prepare for worship, because she is always has her mind on Jesus. She's always ready to be in his presence. It's always the most important thing to her. It's always what she is most excited about at any time, is to go be with the Lord. And when you have that going on, you don't have to think about it. So when you ask about authentic worship, that's what's going through my mind now, is how often is it authentic for me that I approach the platform that way. There is nothing I'm more excited about at any given moment than going to the Lord, being in his presence. And the truth is, that's not me all the time. And there are plenty of times where I take the stage, and we all probably do this. I take the stage, and I'm sort of half there. I know what the job is, I know how to do it, and I know how to function. And I keep going back to that chapter in Amos where God says, "I hate your worship. I hate your music and your I hate it because your heart's not really there." I mean, that's the Tony version of that. But that's an important verse for us worship leaders, and we're not supposed to take the platform in any other way. And yet we 99.99% of all of us do it, and that's not how we're supposed to lead worship.
Yeah, good word. Thanks, Tony. Rich, what's your thought on that?
Well, I think you got two. You have what is authenticity and what is worship. Those are like huge things. So authenticity, I think, I love what Seth Godin said recently. Godin or Godin, he's a blogger, and he says the most authentic person of yourself is probably when you're pooping in your crib when you were a baby. But then he goes on to say this, that everything else since then has to do with choices and strategies about our life. So he's saying basically authenticity is all invented. It's all something that we choose to do. It's a strategy of our life. It's something that's bigger than that, bigger than just simply what just comes out on its own. So we think what being authentic is just somehow like that baby in the crib, pooping in the diaper. When he's saying that it's more than that, that this is this is something that we plan to do, that it's a strategy of your life in a long-term setting. We're working towards this. This is why King David is called a man after God's own heart, even though he's a murderer, he's a terrible father, he's an adulterer, but the strategy of his life was going in the direction towards God's heart. And that's why he was able to do that. It's just like a bride at a wedding is going to be excited about the wedding, but everything about a wedding is contrived, it's chosen, it's a strategy, it's planned. But part of that planning and strategy is this is important. It just goes on with what Alba was saying, because it's something that comes from all the sum of our choices. All the sum of that's what our authentic self is. It's not just in the moment with no preparation. What you've got is what you've got, in other words. So
Right.
How to change that and how to become more authentic is to make these choices. Now the idea of what is worship, that's a big thing, because just like Tony said, we're praying without ceasing, and but also I like what my former professor Richard Brown said: if everything is worship, then nothing is worship.
Right.
So what is worship? The worship expression, just defining that, our expression of worship is something that we choose strategically to represent the best of ourselves, to bring out the best of our church. So it's a choice. It's not just there. So in that sense, you can't say a bride's tears are inauthentic, because the dress was chosen, the flowers were chosen, everything was put in place. But it's all of the choices made up to that point that make it authentic. If it's not authentic up to that point, maybe that's not a real. Maybe it's faked. Maybe she's a gold digger or something. But you could see how the difference. Sometimes we are like that bride who's not prepared. We just put on the dress, if you will, metaphorically, of course, everybody. And in that, have we done all the preparation though? Have we lived our life in such a way? Have we thought in such a way? And so that we're ready when that moment comes. It's not a separate moment. The sacred moment we walk into is there. So I love what Seth Godin says, and it's kind of hit me for a while about the idea of what is authenticity, because oftentimes I think when I was younger, it's like you just be yourself, speak your mind. But if you're in a locker room, you speak like a locker room, right?
Yeah.
But you don't do that every time. Is that your authentic self? No, you choose your authentic self.
Yes. Okay, with the dress and all, I totally get that. That's great. Leslie is swimming. She's swimming in this sea of wisdom here, and so now to grab on the life preserver to anchor in a response from you. Take us a little bit step further. Like, tell us what is your idea of authentic worship, and where, like, in the next question, where do you find, like, how does worship originate? Where does it originate, and what makes it authentic?
Worship has been here since the beginning. I mean, we see angels worshiping Jesus in heaven, and I just love how that it carries over. And obviously we're all born to worship, but I really feel like God gives us the desire to worship Him. And so, in order to do that, I think I need to know the God I'm worshiping. So I know for me, this past season, I've just been discovering who God is, in as much as I can, as much as He'll reveal to me, and then therefore I feel like I can worship Him to the full potential the more and more I get to know Him.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's tell us an experience. Can you give us
Hey guys, somebody's making a lot of noise. I don't know if anybody else can hear that.
Yeah, I hear it too. So we want to remain. Maybe
yours, Brandon.
I'm not even touching anything. You're getting it from me? I hear a lot of laughing. Maybe that was my laugh track. Yeah. So no.
Oh, we'll just keep going. We'll keep going.
All right. So Leslie, can you tell us a time when you were leading worship and you felt maybe, I mean, because we all go through this as worship leaders, like, am I coming across real? Maybe you had a bad morning and you still got that thing going on in the back of your mind. How do you keep those things at bay and keep your focus on Jesus? Because we talked before already about that Jesus is already here. He's already with us. What's been your experience?
There really has been times where I get up to lead worship and I feel prepared and I feel ready, and then I get up there and I'm just made a fool of myself. And then there's times where I don't feel ready, and God provides, and it's great. And I think regardless, in the moments where I just feel like I can't focus and I'm just not connecting, I just always remember that it's not about me, and it's not about what I receive in this moment of worship. It's not about me feeling restored. It's not about, me getting healed or whatever. As long as Jesus is being praised, that's all that matters. And so I always try to remember that, it doesn't matter how I feel. It doesn't matter if I don't feel prepared. Am I praising Jesus in this moment? And so it's just it's really just humbling. You just got to lay it all down and say, you know what? It doesn't matter what I feel in this moment. I'm just gonna praise you because I know you're worth it.
Yeah, awesome. So, like, can you recognize the difference between, or the difference between authentic and inauthentic worship? What is that like when you see other leaders leading? I mean, do you notice that, and how do you deal with that?
There have been times where I have been led by worship, and I'm like, I don't feel God's presence in this moment. I don't feel right. This doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for me to deal with, because like as a worship leader, I'm like, come on, you guys can do it. But the more and more I get put in those situations, I've let them destroy my time, my personal time with Jesus, and I just can't let that destroy my time with Him. And I think for me, I have led worship inauthentically, but I think it's just the more and more I do it, the more and more I grow. The more I can, worship God at the same time while leading.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's kind of hard, like when you see someone who is leading worship, that you think, maybe not, because it's like, where's my place in this? But I think just as long as I keep my heart pure before God, and I know that maybe this isn't right. I just keep myself a little separate.
Yeah.
And just worship him. Yeah.
Good word. Thanks for that, Leslie. Tony, how do we ensure our worship? How do we ensure our worship to be authentic? Our worship leading to be authentic. What are some things what's going on through your mind?
The fact that we gather together every Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, the music is the first thing, lights come up, we invite people in, like all of the things that we do, and obviously I'm generalizing, that's all kind of man-made stuff. It's all sort of things that fit. I mean, it's the same way we put on a play or put on a show outside of church. You know, it's the same kind of thing. We have a start time. The first 15 minutes are going to be this. Then we're going to do this. You know, all of that regimented stuff. You know, it's not that it doesn't make sense to do it that way, but the danger with that is you get people where they are in that moment. So if they're showing up to church, wherever their heads are at, that's the time we're doing it. There's a difference between this organized thing we do and those times when I am, let's say in my personal life, I am broken, I'm on my knees, I am alone in the house, I'm crying out to God, or I'm thankful, or whatever it is. There's a big difference between those moments of genuine worship where it's just me and my God and nobody's watching and nobody knows, and those times that are put on, that are, okay guys, it's showtime now, you know. So there's always that danger that we're gonna find people, including the worship leader and the worship team, who are not in that zone. So can we guarantee it? I don't think we can guarantee it. I think what Leslie said is correct. You have to know your God, and when you know your God, you get back to where Alva was earlier. What I said, where she does not have to think about it. She doesn't have to prepare her mind and her heart. Like, she is just there. She wakes up. It's kind of the baby in the crib thing too, you know. The most authentic self is that kid on Christmas morning waking up so excited that nothing is going to stop that freight train down the hall to get to those presents.
Yeah.
And that comes from knowing God. It comes from the expectation of being with God. It comes with understanding what it means to worship in spirit and in truth. And there's that truth. I think a lot of us don't pay much attention to what that truth is. There's a lot of truths in the Bible that we avoid as worship leaders. It says very clearly, you don't go to the altar and offer your worship if you've got any issue with your brother. How many people out there right now are leading worship on Sunday and they've got conflict with somebody that they haven't dealt with yet? We're not supposed to go do that. And so there's a lot of that in truth thing that we just let slip by the wayside, because the truth is hard and the truth is scary, and the truth means being accountable. It means exposing yourself. There's a lot of stuff that comes with that. So I don't have an answer as to how to avoid being inauthentic, because I think it's part of our human nature just to go that route.
But rather, how do we handle it? You're right about that. So how do we handle it?
How do we handle it?
You're right about we can't avoid it. You're right. So how do we handle it?
It's basically it's just what Leslie says. It's just you go day by day, getting to know your God better. The more you know about God, the more you fall in love with Him. The more you understand and are counting on His promises and understanding mercy, and just understanding how huge all of that is, the more you're drawn to it, the more you won't have to think about it, the less the times of your inauthenticity, because you can worship God even in the midst of your confusion, not being ready to take the stage and all of that stuff. It's such a personal thing, and we get so wrapped up in the show.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I didn't answer your question at all.
No, you did actually. Better than what you know, better than what we asked for, more than what we think, more than what we want to know. Leslie, I see you're nodding your head a lot. You're like really into the game.
Yeah.
What's going on in your heart and your head right now? Because you're like, I see. What's
Well,
up?
he just said, we rely on the mercies of God, and I just love that because, we offer a lifestyle of worship because of the mercies of Jesus through our body and our minds, and it just really reminds me of what Paul says in Romans, and it is like, you just, because of the mercies of God, you just offer yourself as a living sacrifice.
Mm.
And that really struck me because I always hold on to that phrase. It's because of the mercies of God I can do this. It's because of his son I can do this. It's because he loves me that I can love him.
Mm.
So that's what it is. Okay.
Yeah, awesome.
I have something I'd like to add to that if you
Go
don't
for it.
mind. I think that, we live in an iPod generation, and what Tony said about going to the altar, which is in Scripture, where being right with your brother or your sister, essentially, the law's intention is how we treat each other. God's, if you look at when Jesus put the first and second commandment together, he basically said, look, you misunderstand the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments really are about how you treat each other, because you can't worship me if you're not in community. And think of Amos. Think of the disputes with their worship had to do how they're treating people. And think of the idea of dishonest scales. So the idea of coveting, the idea of all of these character traits have to do with us, and they keep us from God. So when we're away from each other, or away from God. So one of the ways to avoid inauthentic worship is to create an environment that's communal, that's together, that's corporate worship. And I think what we miss a lot in modern worship in our culture today is we think that my personal experience, even as the leader, is what sets everything. When I set a table, I'm a servant setting a table for people to be with Jesus and together to be with Jesus, though. And so the idea is we put too much. How to handle this is we put too much on ourselves as to what we are and who we are. We're servants. We're not somehow some conduit for people's worship to God. We're not somehow the veil that's torn, that they go through us. We're not the veil that's torn. We are just servants in the temple, if you will, or in the sacred places of our Sunday to say, let's enjoy this meal together. And so I think the way to stay authentic is to keep separate sometimes. I know I'm worshiping God. I know I'm prepared. I'm like, oh, I'm running towards Jesus, so that's going to be settled. I'm not worried about that. Now I can think about serving others. Now I can think about doing that.
Yeah.
And so what happens too is if we put that pressure on ourselves as worship leader, we're basically, not calling the people to relationship with each other. And I think in worship we need to say to one another, this is why in tradition they have this idea called sharing the peace. So you can actually go to somebody and say, I'm sorry about that thing I said last week, and you say, may the peace of God be with you. And then you're free to worship. This is why confession is part of tradition and things like that. So, we expect that on beat one, we have all our relationships together, when really that's not the case. So if we come to church, and it's like dinner. I have teenagers, or I have one teenager left, and we set a nice table with candles on the table and everything, and if someone's grumpy, or if any of us are grumpy, what does that say? So the idea is, how during the meal do I take that true human self and resolve it so that I'm ready when I leave worship to love my neighbor as myself, and then I can love God properly. So I think that's how we mitigate is the relational aspect of what we do as a church. Do we love the poor? Do we love our neighbor, especially our brother in Christ?
Yeah, man, that took us down to a new road of being authentic, because we didn't discuss before about the mirror and looking into it that way. That's a great word. Leslie, any last thoughts, or you want to maybe you got a new album that you're working on right now, and it comes out when exactly?
Hopefully this spring.
Okay. So, what songs, like in your songwriting, what songs do you have that talk about authenticity of, and also, yes, what's your website is leslieburroughs.com?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And guys, we are tweeting her link right now. So tell us what songs, what when you talk, do you talk in your songs about authenticity of worship? How do you interweave that into your writing? Can you kind of expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. One of my favorite stories is based in First Chronicles 29, where they're just all the people are just giving everything they have for the temple, and I just love that true, just like pureness of worship, of just people just giving all their gold and just saying, "Here it is. I give it all to you because I believe in this. I believe in worshiping at this temple." And so I wrote a song that's about that, and it kind of walks you through the steps of worship of, okay, let's set our minds on Jesus, let's surrender, and because he overcomes, because he is good. And then I just love that. So absolutely, especially when I write worship songs, I love just talking about how good God is and how he's just so worthy of our praise. I do have a few songs that aren't necessarily worship, but they're definitely worshipful, and I just love writing, and I have this thing where if I'm not reading, I'm not writing, and they really just go hand in hand with me. If a lot of my songs come from the Word, and I just love it. It's so much fun.
Right. That's awesome. Well, Leslie, thanks for being with us today
Thank
on
you.
Hangout. It's great to have you and just to hear your heart. I've enjoyed the conversations that we've had off, the stage and everything, and just to talk about what God's doing in your life. Big shout out to Sarah Kelly and Jonas Inkman, because I know they've really been speaking to you. Sarah is just such a wonderful, wonderful lady. So thanks again so much for your time and being out here. And right now I'm sending out your link and letting everybody know what's up.
Awesome.
So thanks for that. Rich, can you kind of bring us a little bit home as far as what's our walking away with today thought? Can you give us that? Because Tony usually wraps us up, but I'd like for you to do it today because Tony's had a lot to say.
Well, I'll just quote Tony then. I think his friend about running, being like, I'm there at Christmas. I think not being so prepared with all your relationships and with your intention and strategy of your life to follow Jesus is what prepares you. So that don't worry, don't put that moment on you if you got what you got in that moment. So make sure that what you got is what you're proud of when you prepare to lead worship.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Leslie, thanks again for joining us today. Great to have you.
Thank you.
I'd love to have you back on another show. It'd be fantastic. So happy Thanksgiving to you. And Tony, my brother, thanks so much for being here and all the wisdom that you impart. And man, when I'm eating turkey, I'll be thinking about you.
Oh, that's really sweet. When I'm feeling stuffed and lethargic, I'll be thinking about you.
I knew it was coming back. But that's all right. That's good. I love you, Tony. Rich, thanks so much, my brother.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. You guys are fantastic. Hey, Periscope, thanks so much for joining us. And everybody watching us back on the replay, you guys are awesome. And we're going to come back in 2 weeks. 2 weeks we're going to have Cynthia. So that's going to be a fantastic show. And then also we have our friend Laura Marriott. But be sure to check out the link that we're providing right now. That's going to go up later today for our webinar next Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, with this fabulous man right here, Rich Kirkpatrick. Thank you, Rich. And we'll be discussing how you can freshen up the worship of Christmas every Sunday. And it's not just simple carols that we sing, but how they can be arranged in such a way that they really, truly are worship prayers to God. And so this is the most fantastic time to worship because we are talking about the coming of our Lord Jesus. So be sure to join us for that. worshipteamtraining.com/events. And guys, we love you, so thanks for joining us here. We'll see you back on the next Worship Team Hangout. May God bless you and your worship team. See ya. Bye.